We all get started with today's session on the topic of how to craft your website messaging and positioning as a startup. I get this question all the time, or not even a question. Sometimes it's not even asked of me from my founders, but we review websites all the time, and there's a lot of room for improvement in most cases. Thankfully, we have one of our friends here, an expert in this particular topic and category, to walk us through some of his best practices and frameworks. But before we go into that, let's cover a few housekeeping items first, just to get this out of the way. Okay, doing a preemptive like we do for all of our sessions, which is the number one question asked in webinars and the history of webinars. Are we recording this and will it be available? The answer is yes. It will be made fully available, the full recording as well as the slides on the Mucker blog afterwards. We don't believe in gating content. There's no form you have to fill out. You'll get access to the whole thing afterwards. And we'll send you a reminder once it's been published to our blog. So yes, it will be recorded. Yes, it will be available in about a day or so. And then secondly, I know many of you have found the webinar chat. Definitely utilize that to engage with each other. But for any specific questions that you want to direct to us and the speakers, make sure you put it into the Q&A box, a separate box. It just helps us weed through the noise to identify questions, okay? So put your questions into the Q&A box. Cool. All right, now with that out of the way, welcome to our monthly growth sessions series. My name is Tony Yang. I run the growth practice here at Mucker Capital. Mucker is an early stage venture firm. We invest in seed and Series A startups across North America, actually all over the world. We have portfolio companies in different parts of the world. But seed and Series A, we also run an accelerator program called Mucker Lab. We welcome any of you if you are joining us for the first time. But really, our guest speaker for today, the star of today's show, is Anthony Pierri from Fletch PMM. I had actually attended similar sessions like this that Anthony will be walking us through previously. And I followed their newsletters, and basically I thought this is fantastic content that a lot of our founders can benefit from. I invited Anthony to do this with us. Anthony, thanks for being here. And yeah, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Can you guys all hear me okay?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. So we are going to jump right in. And this is not a trick question. So I'm actually asking for everyone in the chat to answer. This is a very simple question. We've got a lot of smart people, a lot of founders, entrepreneurs, people from good backgrounds, good schools. I want you to answer this question. Here I go. What is this product? And I'll monitor in the chat. Let's see who gets it first. Again, not a trick question. Socks. Okay, we've got a lot of smart people in the room. Socks, you are correct. All right, how about this one? This one is going to be a little more challenging. What is this product? Phone case. Ellen was the first one I saw, but I see a lot of people, fast followers. Again, we got some top tier talent, Tony, in your cohort. All right, this one has some misdirection. I want to see if anyone gets it right and if anyone falls for the trap. Coffee. Someone fell for the trap. A couple people said mason jars. It is not mason jars. It is coffee. You guys, the rest of you were correct. Okay. How about this one? A little bit slower response. No clue. Consulting. AI. All right. What about this one? Jason said socks. How about this one? More workflow, says Tracy Kimball. Software. Magic. All right. What about this one? Solutions. Wait a minute. Why is everyone confused, right? This should be straightforward. One platform, endless solutions, orchestrate powerful business solutions, single sort of truth, right? This is all super interesting stuff. But not really, right? Because in reality, the problem is these, as you guys guessed, software products, they could literally be anything. And so there is a core principle that has helped steer our business that should not be controversial, but is. People will not care about a product if they don't know what it is. And there's 1,000 reasons, but people have pushed back on us over the last 3 years when we say this. I serve an enterprise buyer, right? The enterprise buyer is different. You can't just say what the product is to them. They're not looking for software. All that's they're just looking for a solution. They don't care what it is. They don't care about your product. All these types of things. I think that this is fundamentally misguided. I think that it is actually really important for the people who are going to buy something that they know what it is. And when you see these, I doubt that any of you were like, "Oh my gosh, someone needs to share that URL with me after the call so that I can go buy this solution," because you don't even know what it is, right? So it would matter that you knew what a product is. So that's why we start this business. Fletch is a consultancy. We've been trying over the last 3.5, 4 years to figure out how can we take big, complicated enterprise B2B software companies, sometimes not enterprise, right? But it's usually startups that we're working with, usually earlier stage, but a lot of times they're B2B, a lot of times they sell to enterprises. How do we help them make it just as simple and easy to understand what the heck it is that they're selling as the shoe example, as the sock example, right? As the coffee example, that you could just go on their website and be like, oh, I understand it. I get it. So we then have been building this framework, trying it out with lots of different companies, probably some companies that you would recognize. And between me and my co-founder and a copywriter on our team, we've now worked with over 500 of these B2B companies. So I think we hold the record in the world for the most positioning projects of this specific segment.
Yes.
But yeah, to the whole premise of it is to try to get it to be as clear as possible to help people figure out how to position. So when it comes to positioning, there are essentially three core positioning strategies. And it seems like it would be a lot more and a lot more confusing, but when you really boil it down, there's effectively three core strategies. So my goal is by the end of our time together, you guys will all understand the three strategies. You'll have some semblance of how to choose which strategy would make the most sense for your product. And then also you would have a good sense of what you would need to actually put on the homepage of your website to best fit that strategy. But before we get to the actual strategies, what is positioning? We have a specific way that we define positioning, and it will make sense because this might feel too narrow to some people, or maybe it feels too broad. But as I explain it, you'll see why it is what it is. When we say positioning, we are effectively saying choosing, it's a choice, a category where you can live in your customers' minds, and then showing what makes you different. So really, it's the category plus your differentiation creates your positioning strategy. And everything is really baked around categories, more for a law of human nature than anything else. People love to categorize things. They love to put things in buckets to be able to say, this is my wife, this is my employer, these are my children. We're putting these things in categories. But then also our products, right? This is my guitar, this is my hammer, this is my car. We refer to almost all objects and relation, everything in our life with the category that the thing falls into. And software is no different. People want to be able to categorize software. This is my software that does blank. This is my blank kind of software. They love to know that. The problem is software companies love to bend categories as much as humanly possible. And founders in general really do not like being forced into a box. So we run into this battle where you have customers. The most customer-centric thing you could do would be to just tell people what category you're in. But the least entrepreneurial thing to do would be to put yourself in a box. So we are at odds. So we try to find a middle ground where you say, no, I actually would feel comfortable with this category, and it will help my customers be able to look at my website and say, oh, those are socks. Oh, this is blank type of software. So when we talk about categories, they're very important. But in reality, most products, especially software products, but most products in general, actually can fit into multiple products categories. So I want us to take back to the early 2000s when the iPhone hit the scene. There's a very real world that you could imagine behind the scenes. The engineers, the people behind the iPhone, probably were pretty upset about Steve Jobs wanting to call this a phone. Because if you think about it, you're like, what functionality of the iPhone overlaps with a traditional phone? Calling and texting. Oh, interesting. Does the iPhone do anything else besides calling and texting? Actually, it does a lot more. It probably overlaps 5% functionality wise with a regular phone, and then 95% of the stuff that it does is not a phone. So there is an argument to be made that you could have called an iPhone some type of computer because it might actually have more functionality overlap with a computer than with a traditional phone. So most categories, you could argue that they could fit in different places. And so beyond that, the category that you pick for your product will actually determine in many ways where and how you go to market. If I'm selling a phone, where am I going to sell it? Probably at the phone store. If I'm selling a computer, probably going to sell that at the computer store. Not only that, the category is going to determine who's my competition. Again, if the iPhone is a phone, its competition is the other phones. If it's a computer, the competition is the other computers. And that will also lead to very different arguments around differentiation. So if I say, what makes the iPhone better than a regular phone? Apple invented this phrase of calling it a smartphone and saying all these other phones are dumb, ours is smart. But if you were going to sell it as a computer, you probably would call it something like a pocket computer, a real computer that would fit in your pocket. And these differentiated arguments don't make any sense if you flip them. If you had said, this is the first pocket phone, it doesn't make any sense. All phones are in your pocket. And if you said, this is the first smart computer, you'd be like, what makes it smarter than the other computers? And in reality, it's probably not smarter than the other computers. So the differentiation is relative to the competition, which is relative to the category.
Yeah.
Not only that, yeah.
Anthony, I have a question that I was going to ask, but you're starting to allude to this. So many of at least Mucker's portfolio companies, they're creating a new category. How would you think about
Oh, I'll get
differentiation?
there. You're, you're,
Okay.
you're, yeah, we'll get there.
Preemptively.
You're
Okay.
preemptively leading because that's
All
a
right.
lot of people's minds right now thinking, well, wait a minute. What if I don't want to be in a category? And
Yeah.
we'll get there for sure.
All right.
Okay. So the other thing to think about is that categories are different sizes. We define the size of a category pretty conservatively. We take it as all the revenue of all the companies that claim the category name. That's how we assess the size of the category. Some people do it by category potential and theoretical and stuff like that. But if you just are trying to compare the size of the category in a specific moment in time, that's a very loose napkin math way of doing it. And in the early 2000s, the mobile phone market was a lot bigger than the personal computer market. I think that still holds true to this day as well. But it's a consideration. If you're thinking, what category do I want to put it in? It's good to know how big are these categories. But it's also good to know that some categories are very real in the sense that if you ask an LLM, who are the top 5 CRMs? You could ask probably a human too, and they'll tell you. But if you said to an LLM, is a good also shorthand way of doing this, who's the top 5 CRMs? It'll be like Salesforce, HubSpot, Dynamics, the people you would expect. But if you did what Addio over here, Addio is a revenue platform. Interesting. Then I can ask the LLM, who are the top 5 revenue platforms? Very different answer. Revenue platforms can mean a lot of different things. Could you clarify what category you mean? It's pushing back, being like, that's not a thing. And you can imagine that when you ask customers, same deal. I'm thinking about getting a revenue platform. People are like, what does that mean? So it's not enough to just think of a name, plop it on your website. And now I have a category, right? That's not really how it works. Additionally, categories grow and shrink at different rates. And there should be grow, stagnate, and shrink because there's a lot of categories that are just flat. But then there are some that truly are shrinking over time. So a category like AI SDR, huge hype going up and to the right. Lots of people, a lot of interest. A product that was very hyped a couple years ago, product-led sales platform, fallen out of favor. It's really been going down. And this is using search as a proxy for people's interest in the category. But it would be good to know if I'm going to pick a category, is it growing? Is it declining? Right? Could I take a dying category and revive it? That's an interesting consideration. If I jump into a bandwagon of a category that's going up and to the right, will I really have a chance of standing out? Right? If it's maybe there's people just flying way ahead of me, I don't know that I'll be able to compete. So it's not just a binary good or bad. It's all just things to consider. But then probably the most unique insight that we've come across, or most helpful insight that we've come across when thinking about these categories, is that the market for a category can be loosely divided into 2 parts. People who are category aware, and that's people who probably have the category, they had it at their last company, they might be actively evaluating it, they understand it, they know it, they get the players, they get the space. And then there's the other half of people who are category unaware, but they are doing, let's say, the job to be done that the category would be really good for. So it's like you have a bunch of people doing something that someone in that category would say, man, If those people knew that this category existed, they would be so excited because this category would help them so much. All the stuff that they're doing is a perfect use case for this category. You can imagine a bunch of people in some random village in the Amazon or something, and they have these nails and they're hitting them with their hands, trying to get the nails in. You'd be like, if only these people knew that there was such a thing as a hammer, this would be a great use case for a hammer. And they're like, what's a hammer? Category unaware. But this is any category is basically some combination of these two buckets. And we can then say how mature or immature is the category is essentially saying if I look at this tech adoption life cycle curve, you guys have probably seen this, where you have innovators, early adopters, then the early majority, late majority, laggards. A really mature category is basically everybody knows about this. The only people who are like the most laggard of laggards don't know what this category is. Almost everyone else has the category, has used it. So these are things like mobile phones, gym shoes, email. You'd be hard pressed to find someone who's, what's email? Or what's a shoe? These categories are so mature, which leads us to strategy number one, which is you may just make the choice. I want to position in a mature category. Now, depending on who you talk to, this can sound like anathema, right? This can be like, what? Who would ever position in a red ocean? What opportunity is there in a red ocean? I don't want to do that, right? But actually, there are many companies that have become very successful positioning in a mature category. What would that mean, though? If you're going to position in a mature category, especially as it comes to your homepage messaging, but really your messaging in general, you really want to call out the category name front and center. And then you want to say, what makes me better than the other vendors in the category, in the same category as me? It sets the bounds of competition effectively at the other people who claim the same category name. And so those two things, right? If I look at a website that says a category that I already know what it is as a customer, that's effectively making it as simple as saying, oh, that's coffee. Oh, that's a phone case. We can do the same with software. So for example, DuckDuckGo. DuckDuckGo, probably you all have heard of, is a web browser. So what do? They call out the category name, search and browse more privately with the DuckDuckGo browser. Unlike Chrome and other browsers, we don't track you. So what are they doing? They're immediately saying, you know this category. The majority of people that they're going after know what a web browser is. And they're basically saying, well, if they already know what a web browser is, they likely already have one. I better say why they would ever switch to us. And they're basically immediately calling out the core differentiation between them and someone like Chrome, right? Now, this is not going to appeal to every single person who's using Chrome because a lot of people don't really care about privacy. But for DuckDuckGo, they're like, our core segment is privacy-minded individuals. And so we're going to focus on them. And they've been able to make a pretty lucrative business. They're doing, I think, 100 million in revenue every year, essentially stealing market share from people like Google, Safari, other different browsers and things like that. Another example, Figma. I'm in Figma right now. I'm sharing from my Figma. And when Figma goes to market, they say we are in the category of interface design tools. When they think about the tech adoption lifecycle curve for UX designers, almost everyone was using an interface design tool when Figma went to market. So they just go out there and say, we are the collaborative interface design tool. And they're not quite as brazen calling out the competitors by name, but it is very clear that what they are doing is, and even here's a quote from Dylan Field, the founder, talking about when he launched, he was saying, the big competitor is Adobe Creative Cloud, and do not understand collaboration. So he's banking on people using Adobe for their UX design would know that it's really not the collaborative. You have to send a file over the internet, then they have to download it, make their changes, send it back. Figma goes to market with this whole web-based approach, multiple cursors, everyone can edit. So it's like really the differentiation was that they're very collaborative. And so Figma's just saying we're in a mature bucket, and this is what makes us different than the other people that you already know. And Figma recently went public. There's rumors that they're going to die from the SaaS apocalypse and all that stuff. I think those rumors are overblown. I think they have a little more staying power. But either way, from a startup perspective, they are a success. And they launched in a red ocean, just like DuckDuckGo, and have done a really good job. So benefits of the strategy, you have budget. People buy this stuff all the time, which means there's really high market understanding, not a lot of education requirement, fast sales cycles, all stuff that you would want. Risks, the bigger the category, the bigger the competitors. There's also high customer standards. So you can't really do the MVP strategy in a mature category. You can't be like, I kind of threw this thing together. It's kind of half-baked. You want to try it? They're like, no, I'm using something that's amazing. When these companies, these new AI CRMs are launching and they don't have copy and paste. And they're like, yeah, but we have a cool AI enrichment. And it's, yeah, but you literally can't even do the basic functionality of a spreadsheet. So this type of stuff ends up biting you. So you really have to go to market with a really finished product, which is why I think Figma at one point said they were in stealth for 3 or 4 years building this thing so that they could launch with this shiny, polished experience. Because that's what people would expect in a mature category. There's no MVP cars that you just buy the car that only has 3 wheels or something. So very competitive. All right. One last thing about mature categories. You cannot pretend that your competitors don't exist. You got this guy? Man, do you ever wish that there was some way to protect your feet? I've got this new product for you. It's called a shoe. That's not going to work, right? The guy's wearing shoes. So a lot of times there's conflicting advice for startups. They say, you really need to be focusing on your competitors at every minute. And then sometimes you'll hear people say, put on blinders, pretend your competitors don't exist. You're Elon Musk being like, I just acted like there was no other companies on the planet. I just went heads down. It's okay. It's actually just describing different maturity levels of the category. In mature categories, you could not pretend they don't exist because those things are going to be front and center in your customers' minds. That when they see that you're in this bucket, they're going to say, new CRM, why would that be better than Salesforce? Why should I switch? So you have to immediately say why they're better. All right. Strategy 2, positioning in an immature category. So if a mature category is the bulk of the market knows this category exists, in an immature category, the bulk of the market does not know the category exists. But again, is doing something that would be a great use case for the product category. So you think about this. This is those product categories that are like emerging. They're new. They're like nascent. They might be getting traction. You probably find a smattering of companies that have raised seed, maybe Series A. Maybe the biggest companies doing 5 million, 10 million ARR. There's no household name brands, but there's some traction. And you'll see multiple people adopting the same language of this category, keep popping up in different places. But the vast majority of the market does not know that this category exists. And so, what are some examples? Personal knowledge graph builders, at-home neurostimulation devices, synthetic user simulation platforms. If I asked a poll, and here I'm like, how many of you have an at-home neurostimulation device? Probably most people are like, I don't know what that is. There are companies that are making these, and they are making money, but the category is just still very new. And so you have to think about it fundamentally different than going to market in a mature category. When you're positioning it in an immature category, the core thing is not the name of the category to the customer because the customer doesn't know what the category is. The core thing is the job to be done that the category supports. And when you say, what is my differentiation? You're not differentiating from the other small startups in this new emerging category. You are differentiating from the way that they do the job to be done without your category in the mix. So this is when you hear people being like, yeah, there's a couple other companies in Y Combinator that are doing the same thing as us. They never really come up in deals. Really, our biggest competitor is manual work of a business that they're doing just in-house. We really have to convince them why they would want to adopt software in the first place over just doing something the way that they've always done it. That's probably a sign that you are in an immature category, at least how you're framing it today. Some examples, DocuSign. When DocuSign goes to market, they are not the only e-signature platform. They did not invent e-signature as a category, but the majority of people that they were selling to had never used e-signature. And so they message accordingly. They say, what's the job to be done? You're trying to get a signature. Okay. What differentiates us? We're the fastest way of doing that when compared to the way that you've been doing it before. Faxing, sending overnight deliveries of paper, all these delays. Who is DocuSign not talking about? They're not talking about other e-signature platforms because they're effectively pretending those platforms do not exist because the bulk of the market has never heard of them. Another example, Calendly. When Calendly goes to market, they're not the first scheduling tool. Doodle had been around for a while. Acuity had been around for a while. But again, the majority of people they were targeting had never heard of a scheduling platform. They'd be like, if you said, I have a scheduling platform, they'd be like, what do you mean, like Google Calendar? No, it's something more specific. And so what does Calendly do? Again, they ignore their competitors and they say, hey, what's the job to be done? You're trying to schedule meetings? Great. We'll help you do that. And what is our differentiation? It's not, here's why we're better than the other scheduling tools. It's why we're better than sending back and forth emails, right? We are a much faster way of doing it than sending back and forth emails. In these immature categories, it's a direct reversal. You actually do want to pretend that your competitors do not exist, right? When Elon Musk has Tesla, he is effectively pretending there are no other electric car companies, right? Because imagine if you go to market with your neurostimulation device and you really want to say why you're better than the other neurostimulation devices. And you're like, you meet some prospect, we're the best neurostimulation device on the market. We're the only one we can charge via USB. It's half the price. They're going to be like, what the hell is a neurostimulation device? I don't care that you're number one in a category that I've never heard of. This isn't actually very interesting to me. So you first have to, again, explain relative to a job to be done, something they're trying to do, and compare to that. Ignore your actual direct vendor level competitors. So benefits of this strategy are there are certain categories that get a lot of hype. And if you align with those strategies, you can get some of the hype. Y Combinator will put out calls for startups, right? They say, we're looking for AI native discovery engines. I don't know what that is, but that clearly that's a category that they think is going to become a household name. And so they're saying anyone who's willing to align themselves to that category, we want to talk to you. We want to fund you. And so if you say, I'm going to hitch my wagon to this new growing category, then maybe I can really launch well and get some of the hype. But on the flip side, categories can die just as quickly as they grow. We talked about AI SDRs a little earlier. Bernie Sanders was on Joe Rogan talking about the ads that company Artisan was running. Probably if any of you are in San Francisco, you saw them. Stop hiring humans. So Bernie Sanders goes on Joe Rogan and says, have you seen these ads? They say stop hiring humans. And then Joe says, that's demonic. So if you've been calling yourself an AI SDR, now you get to inherit all that negative publicity from the world's biggest podcast, one of the most famous politicians of all time, Bernie Sanders. They're trashing the category. And now obviously that will help some people who are like, I hate Bernie or whatever. I want to do the opposite. But there's a lot of people who that's going to be negative press. Same thing, like NFTs. We all remember when NFTs was like the main thing getting funded. Justin Bieber pays, I don't know, $1 million for the Bored Ape. Now they're worthless. And all these people have lost all this money. It's try going to raise money for an NFT startup in 2026. Probably not going to happen. All right. So that leads us to your point before, Tony. What if I don't want to adopt someone else's category at all, either big or small? It leads to the third strategy, which is really positioning to create a new category from scratch. Be the first one, and you get to define the bounds of this. So what does the adoption lifecycle look like here? No one is category aware. Why? Because you just invented it. How could they be category aware if you just thought of the idea 5 seconds ago? So for these people, it can work, right? You could argue, and Vanta does argue this, that they created the automated compliance category. I actually think this is pretty much true. They go to market and they basically, again, they anchor themselves on the job to be done of preparing for a SOC 2 audit, and they basically differentiate against the way that people are doing it. So in many ways, the messaging strategy of strategy 2 and 3 is the same. You are anchoring yourself to a job to be done and explaining why you're different than the way that they're doing it before. But the implications are very different, right? The implications of putting yourself in a real bucket that's growing, that's getting funding, that's becoming part of Gartner's thinking about making the Magic Quadrant. That's all very different than saying our team just in our collective little work is going to come up with a brand new idea from scratch, right? So Vanta does this, and I think they do a pretty good job. Same thing with Gong. Gong goes to market. The category of conversation intelligence doesn't really exist yet. They kind of come up with it. And they anchor to the same job to be done here, coach on calls. They give this differentiation so you don't have to be on every call, right? They're not pitching against other conversation intelligence platforms. How could they? There are none. They invented it, right? There's nothing else. So there's lots of benefits of this. You get to define the category. You get to pick like how big of a job to be done are we solving? Is this a very small point solution thing? Is this a big enterprise end-to-end job to be done that we're making the category for? The pricing, all that stuff, you get this big distribution head start. You give the market a lot of time to associate you with this thing. Like when ChatGPT goes to market, they got a big head start over Anthropic and these other people associating these AI chatbots. Like everyone, it's almost like the Kleenex for really long. For the average person, a lot of people were thinking ChatGPT just is AI, right? That has changed. Anthropic has changed, which kind of leads to some of these risks, right? The risk of this is that the first mover doesn't always win. And I don't know if you're a betting man, but you might be not betting on OpenAI anymore. You might be betting on Anthropic at this point, who is not the first mover, but the second mover. In the same case, Alta Vista, they create the search engine. They're the first. Who wins? Google. Verbo, a lot of people don't know this, vacation rental by owner, started 13 years before Airbnb. Airbnb is, I don't know, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 times as big as they are, whatever the crazy numbers are. And they're the ones who win. So there's always a risk that the first mover, if you go to market the first mover, that someone else will just come in and beat you, right? And be better at the thing that you came up with. There's another one that people will just maybe reject the category if they think you didn't really change enough. So like DocuSign at one point spent millions of dollars trying to rebrand e-signature to intelligent agreement management. And everyone just laughed him out of the room. It was like a meme every time I opened LinkedIn. So much so that they like abandoned the whole project because they were like, "Oh, this is so upsetting. Everyone's making fun of us." And it's you didn't really do anything different. You just changed the label. And then really, there's always a risk that if you get commercial success, you won't get beaten by small startups. You'll get beaten by very large companies. And this was a diagram that was going around in the early days of Microsoft Teams, where Slack had this big head start. They coined this new business communication platform idea. And then Microsoft's, why don't we just do the same thing as that? And then we'll let people have it for free with their existing Office 365 subscription. At which point, all these enterprises, because Microsoft was so deeply penetrated in the enterprise, was like, that's great. Why would I go and all through the headache of doing procurement with this other third-party startup when I could just get it with Microsoft? Great. So at the beginning, Microsoft just sped past them. Now, Slack obviously had a great outcome. They sell for 29 billion or whatever to Salesforce. So this is not a boo-hoo Slack. They did fine. But it's always just something to keep in the back of the mind, right? There is a chance that a very large enterprise company that has distribution and brand equity and existing relationships will just say, oh, that's cool. Why don't I just steal that idea and offer it for free? And then you're kind of SOL, as they say. All right, this is a big diagram. We do not have to talk through it. We could send this after. This is essentially the 3 strategies in a very specific, just all the different things broke out. It's a good handy cheat sheet. You can keep it as you're thinking about this. But that's basically my talk. So curious to hear any questions, anything. Tony, I'll kick
Yeah,
it
I
back to
think
you.
yeah, when you and I and Justin were planning for this, we pitched you the idea of possibly doing a live teardown for some of our portfolio companies. I see one, Nelson, he's
Yeah,
on the panel. We asked him to join. If we are still open to that, we can pull up his website and maybe
for
get
sure.
your initial reactions. And then for anybody else who is in the audience that are still with us, and if we do have time, if you want to volunteer as tribute also and are brave enough to provide your website, I'm sure Anthony could give you some quick feedback. But before we do that, if we want to pull up superinsight.ai, hey Nelson, so we invited me to the panel so he could provide any clarification or answer any questions, but I think it might be beneficial for us to,
Yeah.
at least for the group, to look at it cold and get your general reactions. Before we do that, though, I do have a question around something you brought up earlier with differentiation and jobs to be done.
Yeah.
I see this a lot with a lot of founders where they think their baby is the most beautiful baby in the world.
Yeah.
And the tendency is to, even on the homepage, the hero section, they could get overzealous and put
Yeah.
all of these words, and even to the example that you showed of DocuSign, right? Like
Yeah.
very typed words that put together means nothing.
Yeah.
So what are some recommendations that you would have to, how do you find the right language, the right words to use that are simple to understand and actually has meaning as opposed to intelligence, blah, blah, automated, blah, 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 whatever the example from
Yeah.
DocuSign.
I think a lot of the times people resort to those kind of buzzwordy, complicated explanations when they haven't first made this hard decision. And so they're saying, how can I differentiate for all these different groups? And all the different groups are in different levels of maturity. And so then they have to find something that maybe speaks to them all. So they come up with something like intelligent or some sort of silly language. But really, if you think about it, once you get into if you've made the hard choice of really where do I want to play? Am I doing the strategy 1, strategy 2, strategy 3? The differentiation becomes way easier to answer and way more natural to say. If I said, what makes DuckDuckGo different than Chrome? I don't have to answer with this really confusing weird. I'm like, oh, DuckDuckGo is like the privacy one. You're hoping that the differentiation is something that is so simple that people could say it, people could recite it, right? That they're like, and you see this with consumer brands a lot, right? That you're like one of the big ones was like Red Bull and Monster Energy drink were these masculine drinks. And then there was these new energy drinks that was like Celsius that are like very little more feminine friendly and they're like light. You can just intuitively see the differences in target segment and you don't really have to use a million weird words to describe it. So I always think if you make the hard strategy decisions, it allows you to just speak in plain language
Yeah.
and get across a pretty simple differentiation. Again, provided you have differentiation, because a lot of times people will choose the answer to those questions of which strategy and they
Yeah.
don't really have an angle, right? They're like,
Yeah.
I want to, the amount of companies we've worked with in the last couple of months who are like, we want to do AI agents. And we're like, great. Who are you trying to sell to? The enterprise. And I'm like,
Yeah.
great. What's your angle? Why they would pick you versus they're already getting pitched from Microsoft and OpenAI and Google. Why would they risk firing staff to
Yeah.
agentify huge sections of their workforce with a tiny startup like you over when they could do it with these big companies that they already have existing? And they're like, we have a better data model. I'm like, good luck with that being the thing that makes you get chosen over these giant ones, right?
Yeah, yeah. If I could double click on this topic, so related to what you were saying about the key differentiators and trying to find the right one, I encountered this also quite a bit where our founders say, yeah, we are differentiated from the biggest competitor within these areas. And they
Yeah.
list out three, four, five, six different areas.
Yeah.
How do you keep that from the core messaging on the website to be very crisp as opposed to very busy and convoluted, even though all three to six of these key differentiator factors might be true? How
Yeah.
do you pick the, or do you even suggest picking one or two to call out?
Yeah. It's usually there's two ways of thinking about it. It's sometimes the multitude of differentiation like vectors can bubble up into one concept, right? Like the privacy example of DuckDuckGo, you
Yeah,
could say, or the collaboration example of Figma, where you're like all these things, multiple cursors in the same project, totally cloud-based. You don't have to buy physical software that you get on a CD and install and like all this type of stuff like that could all ladder up to this collaboration concept. But then sometimes it's like actually the laddered up version is still abstract and people really don't get it. Like you see that a lot when companies are like, we're the modern one, like the modern CRM. And it's like, is that going to work? I don't know, maybe. But in a lot of times it's that's too vague. And you're almost better picking one of them, like a hero feature, something
yeah,
specific. And in those instances, it's more if you ever, we used to use this analogy back in the day, but if you've ever been to Panda Express, the restaurant, it's
yeah,
like you go to Panda Express and then people are like, you got to try the orange chicken. And it's like the one thing they're known for, right? Or Chick-fil-A with the chicken sandwich. There's restaurants that have a big menu, but it's like there's one thing you really have to try at the beginning. And that's the thing that's really going to make you come in and learn about everything else. So we
yeah,
also tell people that like your differentiation doesn't have to carry the weight of every single thing that you do that is differentiated. It
yeah,
just, in many cases, has to be enough to have people give you a shot. And that might be something as simple as like the orange chicken, where the software has some specific capability. Like I'll give you an example. We switched from DocuSign to PandaDoc because DocuSign was you had to upload at that time, you had to upload a contract, connect, create little boxes where they would sign over it. And
yep,
PandaDoc had a contract builder. And it was like, just make the contract in here and then it'll all be automatic. And we were like, oh my gosh, that would save us so much time. And then we switched. So it was literally one feature. And then I just saw, I don't know if you've ever heard of the firm called Winter, WYN, I think TER.
yep, yep,
They just did a big quantitative study and they were like, what in these fields where it is more mature, what made you pick one company over the others? And I think 49% of the time it was a specific product capability. So it's like there's sometimes you just have a sweet sauce and that's the thing you put up front and center. And that's what will get people to switch. And you don't have to try to say that here's 37 reasons you should switch. Sometimes it's good just enough to have one.
yeah. We have a bunch of questions come through, so I'm thinking maybe we address some of these questions first, and
Sure.
then maybe then we could pull up Nelson's company's website,
Yeah.
and then if we have time, there's a bunch of people who are eager to have you rip their website to
Great.
shreds. So we won't get to everyone, unfortunately, but maybe we'll get to one other one after Nelson's. But let's go through some of these questions because I think these are some really good questions. So first one that I see is around AI. I did this. I was guilty of this maybe even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when before AI and LLMs that we think of AI today, Back then, it was around predictive analytics, predictive
Yeah.
modeling, and a lot of companies put AI on top of on their messaging. Just add the
Yeah.
word AI
Yeah.
on their homepage in front of the whatever category even. So, what are your thoughts on riding the wave of the general market or public where there's certain things that are extremely buzzy, even though it might not necessarily set you apart, but it's part of that wave? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's really funny. I do see there's a guy named David Bland who maybe some of you follow, and he has the business model canvas, I think is his big thing that you've probably seen. And he
Okay.
had this post that went viral, which was basically in the business model canvas. You could talk about one of the boxes is like, what are your technological resources that make your value possible? And then the other one was like, what's your actual value proposition? And his whole point was AI belongs in the technological resources one,
Yeah.
not the value proposition one. And it got like 4,000 likes. Probably millions of people saw it. But I think that was a spot on thing. It's AI in and of itself is not a value proposition. It is always in service to something else. Now, to be fair, though, I think that there is a giant move right now. Jeffrey Moore wrote Crossing the Chasm. His second book is called Inside the Tornado or something like that. And
Okay.
basically, there's these hyper growth markets where every single person, it flips from being like only the early adopters want this thing to everyone. It's become like a liability if you don't do it. So now everyone has to do it. Even the risk averse people are like, oh, we got to do this now. And so there is giant amounts of budget and initiatives around AI. And so I do think if you are a software company, it helps to have AI somewhere in your core messaging just so that the champion who's reading your website, who has to make the case internally, can link it to an AI initiative. Hey, I think we should get this new software product. I know that we have this big initiative to adopt X amount of AI tools by the end of the year. I think this could fit that really well. So it's like
Yeah.
you can help people by showing that it can fit into these broader company polls into these areas. But by the same token, I think it's gonna become pretty soon where it's first one where they had mobile applications. It was like we have an app, and it was like this giant crazy thing, and then it was like just a given. I think pretty soon in the next, I don't know, I'm not good at guessing the years, but in the relatively near future, I think it's going to be so table stakes that it will be silly to see it in the headline, maybe the subhead, but not the like, oh, the
Yeah.
AI, blah blah blah. It's like it's everyone is AI now. So what's this is not
Yeah.
differentiated at all.
Yeah. Let me ask two more questions, and there's some that came through, but I do want to go through Nelson's website. But
Sure.
one of the questions, I don't know if you have an opinion on this, it might be outside the scope of this presentation, but would love to hear what you think. We recently at Mucker, we did a session, a panel session where we brought in experts on AI SEO, AI
Mm,
search, right? And there's discussions around optimizing your website for the LLMs, the
yeah.
robot, as opposed to the humans. How do you have any thoughts in terms of okay, which master do you serve? Which who should
Yeah.
you should write to, write for? Is there a way that you think about recommending to address both? What are your thoughts
Yeah.
on that topic?
Everything like the people I'm not an SEO, AEO, GEO expert by any means. The people that I follow who are effectively saying these models are getting so good that they are becoming very close to mirroring how a human would think about it. And like we have recently started to get way more business from people finding us on Claude. And they will always get on the calls with us and they'll say, whoever is optimizing your AEO and your GEO must be doing a really good job because you come right up. And we're like, we're doing nothing. What are we doing? We're going
Yeah,
on podcasts. We're creating content on LinkedIn, which I know the LLMs are reading now. We
yeah,
have where we get featured on people's newsletters. So I think the original SEO kind of strategies of being seen as a trusted authority, like I don't think the LLM is dumber than Google's SEO was. I think it's probably smarter at really creating these kind of graphs of like knowledge and like where things fit. So I don't personally place any huge emphasis on like different stuff, like writing it for the LLM. I'm like, I feel like if it's written for the humans and the humans like it, the LLMs will also get it because that's the whole pitch. It's like they're going to replace all the human workers because they're so human like. So it would feel weird if we had to do some sort of weird robotic thing when like kind of the whole deal is that they're supposed to be so smart.
yeah, yeah. Let me ask one more question. Let's open up Nelson's website. I have a Porco, and I see the founder on the call. Thanks for coming. I won't call out the name, but I had this conversation with him the other day, which is on his website, the hero section. To me, as someone who's not in his or her market or industry every single day, When I read it, it was very generic, similar
Yeah.
to some of the earlier examples we were showing on the slides. But his pushback was every one of his prospects, when they read it, even though it's generic, they got
Yeah.
it right away. What are
Yeah.
your thoughts on that in terms of, okay, even though it might seem generic, his audience understood what their product does and the value prop. What
Yeah.
any thoughts on that?
I think it depends. It's correlated almost directly with the level of trust people have in the brand.
Yeah,
So, for example, a friend of ours, she runs a landing pages consultancy agency, whatever you want to call it. She helps
yeah,
you create paid landing pages. And her entire marketing funnel is she creates content on LinkedIn, she develops very devoted followers, and then she effectively says, "Hey, if you need help with your landing pages, I can make them better." And so she writes pay, I think her H1 was like paid landing pages that actually convert or that actually work or something like that.
yeah,
Now, just taken in its like it by itself, you could say, "Whoa, that's super generic." But to your point, her audience, where they're coming from, she has already done a big, heavy trust building up front. And then
mhm,
people
yeah,
who do paid landing pages is a relatively commoditized market in general. You could, so then at that point, they have to say, okay, I need help with paid landing pages. This lady, her name's Tass. This lady, Tass, I've been following her for a year. She posts amazing content about paid landing pages. So I could go to her or I could go to Google or the LLM and I could be like, who can do this? And I'm going to get all sorts of random people that I've never heard of. And then her claim is that she can make it work. They're going to claim the same thing, but there's no trust. So
mhm,
that she ends up winning most of the business. And she's never really getting compared to other competitors in a direct way that way because she kind of already won the battle ahead of time. So I
yeah,
think a lot of times startups, if the value prop feels generic, it's like how often you have to sometimes consider the broader go to market strategy in general and be
yeah,
like, how often are people truly coming cold? That
yeah,
they're like from an LLM search and you pop up and they are like, I don't know any of these brands. I open 5 tabs on my computer and I'm just looking at them and they're all saying the same thing. Okay,
yeah.
if that's how it's happening, then yes, you should not be generic. You should be trying to have a highly differentiated thing. But again, if you take into the broader go to market, I think a lot of these rules start shifting.
Yeah, it's great. Great comment. Thank you. Okay, if you don't mind, let's pull up Nelson's website,
Yeah.
superinsight.ai.
And is insight spelled in a specific way?
Nelson, you can
No, it's
hop on.
just one word, super insights.
Insights with an S?
No S.
Okay. Is it
Yeah.
medical record review?
Yes. There you go.
Okay. I'm going to pull up my screen. I'll share it.
Yep,
Is it this one
superinsight.ai.
right here?
There you go. Yeah.
Okay.
And don't
Medical
hold
record.
back. Like
Yeah, yeah,
Nelson
for
has
sure.
thick in. They're doing well, and he's looking for some constructive feedback.
For sure. Okay, medical record review and chronology software. Fast, reliable, affordable medical record review for legal and medical experts. Super Insight is the #1 AI-driven medical record review and chronology software solution for attorneys. Okay, the first thing that I would do if I was like auditing this, I would basically try to gauge because I'm not in your space. I'm not a subject matter expert in lawyers and medical record reviews and stuff like that. I would basically say, is this a real thing? I would go medical record review and chronology software, and I would say, what are the top 5 vendors of medical record review and chronology software for? And then you say for attorneys. So I would say for attorneys, and I would say what does the LLM come up with? And if it comes up with 5 people that you, Nelson, would be like, that's really who we compete with, or if it says, let's see it, I'll treat top, okay, it's working. I did the extended version to get us a better answer, but it takes a little bit longer. But if it's confused and it's do you mean this or do you actually mean this? Then it would tell me maybe this is not actually that mature of a category. But if it is mature, it will have direct implications on how I would gauge what you've actually written, if that makes sense. It is really thinking long. Let's see. Okay. And from what I understand, I feel like I've heard of this concept. It's if you're a lawyer and you need medical records, you would go to something like this. Is that right?
Yeah. We know it's been around for quite a while. It's
Okay.
the AI is new. So AI term is new. Everything else is existing in the past.
Are these the names that you would expect to come up?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay. And your customers know these names.
Most of them know at least about 2 to 3 of those companies.
Okay. So yeah, if you met an attorney and you said, "Hey, can you name any medical record review chronology software?" They'd be like, "Oh yeah, I've heard of Even Up or file line or something like that.
Right.
That's pretty normal how the conversation would go.
Yeah.
Okay. I would imagine that all of those people, you tell me though, would probably make this argument, maybe not affordable. Which of these things would be the most challenged?
I think reliable. That's with AI. Nobody is think it's reliable at the moment. So
Really, is that a
yeah.
big complaint of these other companies? It's like
Yeah,
I can't really
imagine
rely
like
on them.
if you're trying to get a cooking recipe, it's fine, it's not reliable. But you're trying to take the
Yeah.
document and go to court, you need to be extremely reliable.
Okay. Then I wonder if you want to do that because like you're splitting strategy one, which is the mature category, and strategy two, which is immature. Like you're saying, wouldn't it be great to strengthen your case, save time, maximize wins? Those to me feel like more just outcomes that the category itself would be offering. That like theoretically, that would be an outcome you would want from any one of these. So if it is mature like that, you could probably just cut that. You don't need that. I'm assuming they're all HIPAA compliant. Is that correct?
Most of the bigger guys for sure, yeah, but there are startups that are not.
Okay. But again, those startups are probably not on the radar of most of your customers. So,
Right.
like, I might just think about these as the people I need to beat. And I would say, probably don't need to include this. Because again, we're trying to get it to a really refined, specific angle. And so for me, maybe it's around reliability and you
Mm.
build the whole message around, isn't it so frustrating that you can't rely on these other providers? What if I told you that we actually are the first one that actually is reliable? And here's how we can prove that's actually the case. That to
Uh,
me then takes this kind of broad message that feels generic, but it has like nuggets of differentiation and really just like putting the core angle. Like the Figma one I said in the talk, the fact that it's collaborative, unlike these other ones that are not. If you really lean on reliability as the main core answer, then you can build the whole argument around that. You could talk about why is it so bad if they're not reliable, like twisting the knife, getting the pain. And then you could think about it through that lens. Again, do they all, where no, do they all analyze the medical records?
yeah, that's one of the things that's part of the product. But
Yeah.
I think for sure, I think reliable is like 90% of the concern. So if we can kind of
Yeah.
address that and become a category leader, and, with
Yeah.
the story on that, that will make a lot of difference. So fast and affordable, that's good, but it's not the main thing. The main thing is reliability.
Yeah. And you could just think about it like if someone already knows about this type of software, you could just get rid of anything that would just be redundant. That would feel, if I was explaining, I have a new car company and I'm going to sell you the car. And I'm like, let me tell you about it. It's got four wheels, it's got a steering wheel, it's got chair. You're like, you don't have to tell me that. I already know that, right? That's what a car is. Anything that is in that bucket, you could just cut it, right? Analyze complex medical records, I assume would be all of them would say they do that. So you could just cut that. They already know what the category is. They're hoping it's going to strengthen their case. Cut it. Save time. They're hoping that. Cut it. Maximize wins. Cut it. These are all things that you would just expect of any of them. So you really just need to make the argument, what makes us different than those other people? Why would I consider changing my mental structure of who owns this space? In my mind, all the medical record companies are these ones. Why would I want to have to think about it and adjust my mental structure to fit this new company? Oh, that's the reliable one, right? That could be an angle.
Yeah.
Would you recommend that if reliability is the core here for this market, would you recommend that Nelson change the H1 where it says medical record review and chronology software? That's the category,
Yeah.
clearly naming what it is, but that's it. It's, boring. Okay. But would you wordsmith it and just say something along the lines of again, even this is not, in my opinion, not much better,
Yeah.
most reliable,
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever category, right? Or would you try to find more creative ways to communicate the reliability for that category?
I think it's a spectrum, right? If you have some sort of great copywriting muscle internally, there might be cleverer ways of saying that. We have
Yeah.
this article on our website. We launched a
Yeah.
newsletter not that long ago, but we
Yeah.
wrote one called How to Write an H1. And effectively, it's what you're describing, Tony. It's if you are in
Yeah.
this bucket, you're really going to want to say, I think I have an example,
Yeah.
like where you're basically just like the only truly reliable one might be an example, right? Like the only truly reliable record software,
Yeah.
medical record software. And again, there's a million ways to phrase that, but like that should get a
Yeah.
clear immediately. That's what the claim you're making.
Yeah, I read that blog post or newsletter post, and that's actually
Oh,
what
nice.
prompted
Yeah.
me to reach out to you. So if you are a Mucker portfolio company, you should go read that. That's your homework, okay? Go read that article. It's on
Yeah.
fletchpmm.com. Can they
Yep.
find it easily just on your homepage, or do you have to?
Yeah, it's just if you hit newsletter, it's like the top one.
Got it. Okay, so definitely go read that. Okay, we're pretty much at the top of the hour. Do you mind pulling up the last slide, Anthony, with
Yeah, for sure. Let me pull
the
it up right
final
now.
calls to action, if you will?
Yeah.
So while Anthony pulls it up, sorry, we couldn't have the chance to get through all the volunteers who wanted the teardown. I'm sure if you guys want to reach out to Anthony, he's super busy, but if you send him an email, let him know that you guys saw his presentation with us,
Yeah.
maybe he'll reach out. At the very least, he'll probably point you to some additional resources like that, right? So,
Yeah.
so definitely in the middle box, contact, that's Anthony's email. Don't abuse it, please. And don't abuse my email as well. But reach out to him, as well as if you're a Muck Report Co., reach out to me, because that's why my team is here to help with stuff like that. But definitely Anthony is available to everyone in this call. On the right, sorry, the left-hand box, we do sessions like this. If this is your first growth series webinar session with us, we do these every month where we get one of our expert friends in our network to present on topics related to startups and growth and all that. And so if there is a particular topic that you are interested in, we want to hear from you. So let us know. Just email my team member, Justin at microcapital.com for any topics that you'd like to see us cover. And then on the right-hand side, if you are a founder working on a startup, if you're looking for investment or to join an accelerator, you could probably go find more information on mucker.com. But aside from that, we also do have a lot of great resources on the Mucker blog, including past sessions of webinars covering different topics on go-to-market, product, fundraising, stuff like that. They're all free. You don't have to be a portfolio company to read up on those or even subscribe. If you subscribe, you will get notified. But definitely for founders in our portfolio, go read that article. And if you can't find it, at least email me or Anthony will point you in the right direction. Anthony, thank you so much for doing this with us. There are a lot of questions we didn't get to that just shows how engaged the audience is, as well as how important of a topic this is. Hopefully, they'll be able to reach out to you and perhaps you can help them. But regardless, thanks everyone for joining us today, and we'll see you at the next session. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. This was a blast. Talk to you guys soon.
Awesome. Take care. Bye.
Bye.